I very much regret that this has happened, because there is no case whatsoever for finding Ken Livingstone guilty of anti-Semitism or anything related to it. The judgment of the National Constitutional Committee that he brought the party into disrepute was mistaken. It is the judgment of the National Constitutional Committee that Ken Livingstone is guilty that has brought the party into disrepute. Ken Livingstone has been consistently a very consistent opponent of racism and anti-Semitism. During his tenure at the town hall, he gave a lot of space to minority communities, including Jewish organizations. Also, he is personally, I know personally close to some Jews. He is the last person to be labeled anti-Semitic. What has happened is that people have used the accusation of anti-Semitism as a political weapon, as a hammer, to hit those people with whose view they disagree. Now this is very, very bad indeed. Those of us who have lost friends and relations in the Holocaust, and who in any case aghast at this horrible crime at humanity, are deeply hurt if their fate is used for this purpose. The victims of the Holocaust had all sorts of political persuasions and none. Right, there are two motives. First of all, the government of Israel tries to label anybody who is critical of its policies as anti-Semitic. And indeed, a few weeks ago it came out that one of the attachés to the Israeli embassy had the job of trying to, smear a civil servant who's not very friendly to Israel, and smear some conservatives who are not very friendly to Israel. They're doing the same thing through the Labour Party. In the Labour Party, they use the so-called Jewish Labour movement. They have been fellow travellers with the mainstream Jewish Labour Party always. Now, the mainstream Jewish Labour Party has a very bad record. It was responsible for the Nakba. It is true that it has sometimes made overtures towards peace, but whenever it has to choose between Jewish ethics and 19th century nationalism, 19th century nationalism has won out. In fact, I have no high regard for the Israeli Labour Party. I have high regard for Israelis like Uri Avneri, and in fact yourself, who have opposed, the oppression of the Palestinians. A very high regard for them, and also for milder critics of the Israeli government. And the Jewish Labour movement was probably behind this letter, I suspect. They have been a ruthless opponent of Jeremy Corbyn. They have ruthlessly sided with his opponents in the Labour Party. Now, as far as Israel is concerned, historically, over the years, The Guardian has had a better record on, you know, on promoting Palestinian rights than some of its rivals. But, you know, as soon as that issue, you could use that issue to hit Jeremy, it's used. Even if in the next column they take a better approach, you know what I mean? They use anything to smear Jeremy Corbyn and smear him as anti-Semitic. And the attack on Livingstone is in fact part of that. As well, of course it's true that Zionism, since this is such a, you know, mainstream Zionism, but there are parts of Zionism which are actually, you know, quite pro-Palestinian, but mainstream Zionism since 1895 has tried to label anybody any non-Jew who is opposed to Zionism as anti-Semitic, and any Jew who is opposed to it as self-hating. Both of these claims are ridiculous. So it was an inherited strategy. But you see, the Holocaust, I think, has changed everything. And this is no longer a harmless thing. It's an attack on people like myself and the people who are indeed concerned about the loss of 6 million Jews. To use them as a political tool is awful. No, it's just awful.
You and some of your friends hold those opinions which you have spoken about, and yet in the Jewish press, like the Jewish Chronicle, etc., we can hear no voice of that kind. That must be quite frustrating sometimes.
It is. Mind you, a few weeks ago the Jewish Chronicle did publish an advert, which I've got in my pocket actually, you know, of people, I think you signed it as well, supporting Resolution 2335 by the UN. And of late, because it's critical of the of some of the legislation of the Israeli government, they've actually published last week an article by the Holocaust expert Professor Yehuda Bauer, who says that free speech in Israel is in danger, you know what I mean? But in the past, when, you know, Jews for Justice couldn't got adverts in, had to use The Guardian because they couldn't use the Jewish Chronicle, wouldn't print it, and of course very often critical letters weren't printed. Again, one has to realize two things come together. One is the trend of things which I've already described. And the other thing is that whatever fate it has, this Jewish Chronicle was originally established in the 1890s, or rather taken over in the 1890s, in order to propagate Zionism, not just as a Jewish newspaper. Well, colonialism is nothing to be proud of. And the Balfour Declaration and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, I mean, let's take them together, were aspects, they're mutually contradictory in parts, of course, but they were aspects of colonialism. And, you know, the British at the time were determined to get a foothold in Palestine. They thought that supporting the Zionist project would be a good way to do it, simply because President Wilson didn't want any new colonies, mind you. He didn't break with a colonial policy in South America. That's a separate thing. He didn't want any new colonies. You know, that you could be trusted, and they said they could be trusted with a mandate if they were going to foster a Jewish settlement in Palestine. Now, the colonies, Jewish colonies in Palestine, would have been a problem for anybody ruling it, whether you had the Balfour Declaration or not. But of course, the fact that you had the Balfour Declaration made the conflict worse. You then got you got the Arab Revolt, and afterwards there were modifications of British policy, and so on and so forth. Now you have got a position where you have got a Tory government which is under pressure under various things. They also have a doctrine that colonialism is, although it's in the past, is something to be proud of. And I'm afraid Mrs. May is just being, in that context, Mrs. May is just being opportunist. But I mean, the Balfour Declaration is nothing to be proud of. Balfour, as I say, if it hadn't occurred, there would still have been a problem, but the problem would have been solvable. The problem would have been solvable. The Balfour Declaration made things worse.